He placed her on the table and started by cutting off her head, her arms and legs. Then he removed her skin and cut her other body parts into squares to make it look like pork meat and prevent buyers from suspecting. In Iba town in Lagos, Nigeria, Chief Obi, a well-known figure, is a successful pork meat seller whose business thrived both at the local market and online. He advertises his business through his popular Facebook page with thousands of followers. Chief Obi's charismatic charm and generous nature makes people easily drawn to him. Aside from selling pork to people in the market and online, Chief Obi advertises job openings from time to time. He would hire people and tell them to leave wonderful comments on his Facebook page. Every month, hundreds of people would apply to Chief Obi's job, but only a few would be chosen. Unknown to his followers, Chief Obi has a dark secret. Chief Obi's Facebook page, which he uses to promote his pork business, had slowly become something else. He uses the platform to get fat, fair-skinned women, offering them attractive job opportunities at his thriving pork outlets. These women would go for Chief Obi's interview, which takes place in a remote part of the town. He has a big building with 10 rooms, and what he does with the 10 rooms is beyond people's imagination. To make his plan work and lure his victims to his house, Chief Obi would give job seekers a popular bus stop very far from his house. When they get there and call him, he would ask a bike man to come pick them up. That way, he is sure that his location remains safe and hidden from job seekers. Chief Obi has three lovely children and a wife who resides in the UK. He sends money to them from time to time, but his business was not fetching him the kind of money he wanted. He wanted to make more profits, but the pork business was not generating enough for him. So he came up with a plan to invite fair fat women for interviews and solve his money problems. Aside from the job interviews Chief Obi posts online, he often lures his victims by chatting them through their DMs. He would watch out for fair-skinned women and get to know them. After a week or two of chatting and getting to know them, he would then tell them that he has an open position in his shop. The unsuspecting women would jump at the offer and go for the interview because of the juicy package that comes with the interview. His first victim was a married woman, Mrs. Benson, who desperately needed a job to support her husband, to enable him rest during weekends at least. When Chief Obi chatted her up through her DM several times, she did not respond as she was skeptical at first. But a few days later, she posted on her Facebook story that she needed a job and would appreciate anyone willing to help. Chief Obi chatted her up immediately he viewed her story. How come you've been ignoring me and I have exactly what you want? I have a position for you at one of my stores. You should submit your CV to the email address below if you're interested. To Mrs. Benson, the message from Chief Obi was an answered prayer. She immediately apologized for not responding earlier to him and she submitted her CV immediately. She was invited for an interview the next day. When she got to the address, it was an open space with fence and gates. She called the chief with the number he left in her DM the previous day and he asked her to wait there. After waiting for less than 5 minutes, a bike man called Mrs. Benson on phone and he told her that he was in charge of taking people to the interview venue. Mrs. Benson asked the bike man if the venue wasn't far and he replied that it's close by. As she stood there, contemplating about going with the bike man or not, another candidate arrived at the venue and the bike man took her to the venue. Mrs. Benson took another bike and went after them. When she got there, she found out that the house is in a secluded place, but there were more than 10 candidates waiting to be interviewed. There was no number or address on the house, and it was a very old building that looked abandoned. Mrs. Benson had her suspicions, but she never imagined the horror waiting for her after the interview. The interview was in two stages. The first stage involves writing with questions in different areas to test their cognitive ability. The second stage is the oral stage where they get to meet the owner of the company, Chief Obi. Chief Obi interviews the candidates inside a noise-proof room. At the point of the interview, he would excuse himself, feigning stomach pains or pretending to using the toilet. But when he comes back, he would attack his victims from behind by placing his poisoned white handkerchief in their nose, making them pass out. Then, He would drag their body to a room nearby where he would tie their hand, mouth, and legs. Most times, he always ensured that his victims were the last to be interviewed to prevent anyone from suspecting anything. When Mrs. Benson woke up later that night, she found herself in the dark. She started screaming for help, but none came. She did not realize that she was in a noise-proof room and no amount of screams would attract the neighbors or anyone to her. By midnight, the room swung open as Mrs. Benson whimpered and cried silently. Chief Obi's heavy footsteps echoed in the silent room. He's wearing an apron and holding a big butcher knife. He stood at the middle of the room. He smiled at her and waved. She pleaded with Chief Obi to let her go, but the chief laughed out loud. He called her arrogant for not replying his Facebook messages, and he also asked her to say her last prayer. Mrs. Benson fought for her life and begged Chief Obi to let her speak to her family for the last time, but he laughed at her mockingly. He covered her nose again, but this time it was to finally kill her. He held onto her until she took her last breath. Then he took her to another room where he has different kinds of knives to make his job easy. He placed her on the table and started by cutting off her head, her hands and legs. Then he removed her skin and cut her other body parts into squares to make it look like pork meat and prevent buyers from suspecting. He then packaged these meats in Ziploc bags to sell them at the markets. Chief Obi's business began to bloom as he made more profits and he gathered more followers on a Facebook page. Chief Obi was able to do this without anyone suspecting because he has a small farm where he rears pigs inside his compound. He also employed butchers who comes around to kill the pigs and employees who pack them in Ziploc bags. He posts the entire process on Facebook to convince people that he sells only fresh pork meat and this helped his business. No one knows Chief Obi's dark secrets and his house of horrors. Mrs. Benson's husband tried to reach her many times when she did not get back from the interview late at night. 2 days later, Mrs. Benson was declared missing by the police after her husband reported at the station. They tracked her to the popular bus stop, but no one around the area saw her. Chief Obi had paid heavily to ensure that the bike men who pick up the candidates keep their mouths shut. After Mrs. Benson's case, Chief Obi lured other unsuspecting women through his Facebook account, and he would always use the same format to keep them locked up in the noise-proof room and sell their body parts after killing them. 3 years later, Chief Obi invited his 50th victim, Amaka, a single mother of two, struggling to make ends meet. She was lured into his trap because she was desperate for a stable income to take care of her family. She had seen Chief Obi's job post and she applied, waiting eagerly for a response. As usual, Chief Obi invited Amaka for the interview and sent directions to the popular bus stop. Unknown to him, Amaka was accompanied by a 15-year-old son, Ike, who had insisted on coming along with his mom. She asked him to stay close and take another bike to wherever she's been taken to. When the bike dropped her at the front of the gate, Amaka called her son to stay at a nearby kiosk while she went for the interview. As Amaka entered Obi's house, her fate was sealed, or at least that's what Chief Obi thought. There were other candidates who came for the interview, but as usual, she was the last one to be attended to. After tying her up in the noise-proof room, preparing for another gruesome act, he realized he had run out of the special bags he used to dispose the bodies. Frustrated, he drove out to get more. He thought nothing of leaving Amaka behind. After all, who would dare suspect him, a respected businessman in his community? Meanwhile, Ike, growing anxious when he could not reach his mother, decided to take action. Trusting his instincts, he walked up to the gate of Chief Obi's house. The gateman, puzzled by the sight of a young boy asking to enter, reluctantly let him in after Ike convincingly claimed that Chief Obi had asked him to wait for the interview. Once inside the compound, Ike could feel that something was wrong. He wandered around the property until he found the living room where different bags, shoes, wigs and other women items were stored. His eyes caught his mother's bag and phone and he knew something was wrong. Terrified but determined, Ike managed to avoid the gateman's suspicions by claiming he needed to grab a drink at a kiosk nearby. He raced to the nearest police station to report the horrifying situation. However, the police, skeptical of his story, delayed taking action. They interrogated him for hours, doubting whether he had seen what he claimed. After several frustrating hours, two policemen were reluctantly assigned to accompany Ike back to Chief Obi's house. But upon arriving, Chief Obi, who had returned by then, greeted the officers calmly, with no trace of fear or guilt. Leading them aside for a private conversation, he easily bribed them, promising a cut of his profits and their silence in return for keeping the boy quiet. To Ike's horror, the corrupt officers not only refused to help, but also had him locked up, claiming he was causing unnecessary trouble. For 2 agonizing days, Ike was detained, crying and begging anyone who would listen to help save his mother, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. Luckily for Ike, he spoke to one of the policemen and he listened to him. He advised him to pay a huge sum of money for his bail if he doesn't want to end up staying there for months. With the policeman's help, he was able to call his uncle to explain the situation of things. By the time Ike was released on the third day with the help of his uncle, he knew he had no time to waste. Realizing that the authorities could not be trusted, Ike decided to seek help from the young boys around his neighborhood. His late father was well known and respected for his generosity and kindness, so the boys were willing to help Ike. Ike used the rest of the money from his mother's account to pay the hoodlums, and together they gathered a crowd from Chief Obi's neighborhood to confront him. At first, most people in Chief Obi's community were hesitant to believe Ike's shocking story, but as they discussed the strange disappearances of women, the atmosphere of doubt began to shift. He also showed them the pictures he took from the window when he saw the female items inside the room at the chief's place. He did not mention it to the police when he went there because he was afraid that the police could delete the pictures or even destroy his phone. As the people checked the pictures, they began to exclaim. A Malam who ran a kiosk near Chief Obi's house also spoke up. He had noticed something odd for months. Some women would enter Obi's compound but never come out. He has had an encounter with a female who bought water and snacks from him. He was supposed to give her some balance for her payment but did not have it. So he asked her to come back for it when she's done with the interview, but he never saw her after that. Days later, a man showed him the picture of the woman at the popular bus stop, but he could not tell him that she came for an interview at the chief's house because he wasn't sure if she left there or not. His testimony pushed the crowd into action. One of the local vigilant leaders, who had also grown suspicious of Chief Obi for some time, offered to take the lead. They devised a plan to infiltrate the house. The vigilant leader approached the gate man. He asked to see Chief Obi under the pretense of delivering a message. When the gate man went inside to fetch Chief Obi, the vigilant leader unlocked the gate, allowing Ike and the mob to enter. They stormed through the house, frantically searching each room. The stench of death filled the air, but what they found in the kitchen freezer horrified even the hardest among them. Human body parts wrapped in plastic and stored alongside chunks of pork. The sickening realization hit them all at once. But as they tore through the house, they were too late to save Amaka. She had already been killed and her body had been prepared for disposal. Ike fell to his knees, devastated, as he cradled his mother's lifeless body, his cries of grief echoing through the house. However, in one of the other rooms, they found a woman who was still alive. She's a fresh graduate who had come for the interview. She was gagged and bound by Chief Obi, just like Amaka. She had only been there for a short time and was spared the fate of Chief Obi's previous victims. She was quickly untied and led to safety, her life spared in the nick of time. As the mob apprehended Chief Obi, the vigilantes made sure he was beaten very well before handing him over to the police. By this time, they ensured that the bribed officers would not be part of the investigation. They contacted the Commissioner of Police to report the case, and the news of Chief Obi's atrocities spread like wildfire, shocking the community. His house was soon searched thoroughly, revealing more evidence of his heinous crimes. Despite Ike's efforts, the loss of his mother weighed heavily on him, but his bravery had saved another life and finally exposed the true horror behind Chief Obi's facade. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and share to help my channel grow.